The first time Tu Diem met CEO Toan's relatives, everyone was surprised. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the room, carrying nothing but sincerity in her heart. Tu Diem had never imagined standing here, face to face with the people who shaped Toan's life. Every glance, every silence felt like a judgment, yet her gentle smile shone through the tension. For Toan's relatives, it was unexpected. This was not the woman they pictured for him. But in her eyes, they saw something unshakable: kindness, courage, and a love that had already weathered storms. That first meeting was more than a formality. It was the beginning of acceptance, of questions, and perhaps the first fragile bridge toward a future together. The journey back to the countryside began with a silence filled with emotions that words could not fully capture. For Toan, this was not just a trip. It was a return home, bringing Tu Diem, the woman who had walked into his heart, to meet his family for the very first time. The car rolled gently along the winding village road, where endless rice fields stretched under the golden sun. The wind whispered through the stalks, and the songs of sparrows echoed in the stillness of noon. The countryside appeared simple, yet rich in warmth, a complete contrast to the busy, crowded life of the city. Inside the car, Tu Diem sat quietly by the window. Her delicate fingers played nervously with the hem of her blouse. She smiled softly, but her eyes betrayed a trace of unease. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I am a little worried. What if your family does not like me?" Toan turned toward her, his gaze calm and reassuring. He reached for her trembling hand, holding it firmly, as if his strength alone could shield her from every fear. "As long as you are yourself," he said with a gentle smile, "they will love you." Those words, so simple, sank deep into Tu Diem's heart. The countryside, the sound of the wind, and the steady beat of her heart blended into one quiet moment of peace. When the car slowed before the wooden village gate, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Villagers paused their conversations and turned curious eyes toward the vehicle. Women in plain baba shaded their faces from the sun, whispering with surprise, "Is that Toan's girlfriend? She's so beautiful, so elegant. Surely, she must be from the city." But they were wrong. Tu Diem was not a city girl at all. She had grown up in the countryside herself, only carried to the city by fate and hardship. The gate creaked open, revealing a brick kiln glowing red in the afternoon light, a tall tree casting its shade, and bougainvillea blooming brightly on the veranda. On a bamboo chair sat Toan's mother, waiting with quiet dignity. Beside her was his grandmother, eyes sharp despite her age, and his grandfather with a gentle smile. Several relatives gathered around, their faces curious yet cautious. Tu Diem's heart pounded as she stepped into the courtyard. She held a small basket of gifts, cakes, tea, and fruit she had carefully prepared. Bowing slightly, her voice trembled but remained polite and sincere. "Good afternoon, Aunt, Uncle. I brought a small gift for the family." The silence was heavy until Toan's grandfather broke it with laughter. "Oh, what a lovely girl. And so polite, too." His words melted the stiffness, and smiles began to appear. During the meal, the warmth of the countryside unfolded in the form of simple dishes: braised fish, boiled chicken, sour river fish soup, and fresh vegetables dipped in ginger fish sauce. Yet beneath the laughter and clinking chopsticks, Tu Diem still felt the weight of watchful eyes. An uncle teased with a grin, "You must be used to Western food in the city. Can you handle fish cooked in a clay pot?" The table burst into laughter, waiting for her reaction. Tu Diem's smile never faltered. She gently took a piece of fish and said softly, "I love simple food. It is far more comforting than anything else. And I am not from the city. I was born and raised in the countryside." A wave of surprise swept across the table. Conversations hushed, then shifted into nods of understanding. The air became warmer, more accepting. Toan, sitting by her side, could not hide his pride. Later, when a child accidentally spilled soup across the table, Tu Diem was the first to act. She caught the bowl before it tipped further, wiped the mess quickly, and knelt to soothe the embarrassed little one. "It's all right. Just be careful next time." The family watched in silence, then murmured to each other, impressed by her calmness and kindness. But the true test awaited her in a quiet room filled with the scent of incense. Toan's grandmother, known for her strictness, invited Tu Diem to sit alone with her. "Child," she said firmly, "life in the countryside is hard. No shops, no comforts, no easy days. Can you endure that? Can you stand beside Toan when life turns heavy?" Tu Diem lifted her eyes, steady yet tender. "Yes, grandmother. I was raised in the fields. I know the struggles, the scent of the earth. If I love Toan, I believe I can love all the hardships that come with him. With love and unity, nothing will break me." The grandmother studied her in silence, as if searching her soul. Finally, she set her teacup down, and her voice softened. "Your words seem sincere. Just promise me one thing: never let Toan suffer, for he carries the hopes of this family." "I promise," Tu Diem answered with a bright, unwavering gaze. When they returned, whispers filled the yard. Relatives exchanged glances, but it was clear the girl had passed the first trial. An elder, known for his stern nature, stepped forward. Folding his arms, he declared, "I thought Toan's bride would be proud and arrogant, but she is respectful, gentle, and truly knows her place. She is worthy." The courtyard erupted with applause and laughter. The suspicion of the morning was gone, replaced by warmth and approval. Toan squeezed Tu Diem's hand tightly, his eyes shining with pride. "I told you," he whispered, "as long as you are yourself, they would love you." Her eyes glistened with tears as she smiled through them. "I feel like I truly belong. Like I finally have a family." That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the village sky in gold and crimson, Toan and Tu Diem sat quietly by the pond. The fields whispered with the wind, birds sang their twilight song, and peace wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. Toan turned to her, his voice full of emotion. "I am so happy you were accepted today. I know you were nervous, but you did more than I ever dreamed." The days that followed were like a gentle stream, carrying both hope and uncertainty. Toan, though buried under the weight of company responsibilities, never allowed a single day to pass without asking about Tu Diem. He searched the city, the countryside, and even returned to the old abandoned house where their paths had first crossed. Yet she remained a shadow close enough to feel in his heart, but far enough to slip through his hands. Tu Diem, meanwhile, wandered through unfamiliar streets and markets, clutching onto dignity as tightly as she clutched the small bundle of belongings she carried. She sold fruits, bundles of wood, and wild vegetables, whatever she could gather. Each coin she earned was a small victory, but also a reminder of her fragile existence. She told herself not to dream, not to hope, yet every night she closed her eyes and his face appeared. Toan's voice, Toan's kindness, the way he shielded her when the world turned cruel-lit, haunted her heart. One evening, fate intervened again. Toan was returning late from a business trip, exhausted but restless. As his car slowed near a night market, his gaze froze. Amidst the flickering lanterns and calls of vendors, a slender figure bent over a basket of wild papayas. The sight pierced his chest. Without thinking, he stepped out into the rain-damp street. Tu Diem, his voice broke the night. Her hands trembled. She turned, and for a long heartbeat the world seemed to stop. The crowd faded, the noise melted away, and only his eyes intense, searching, desperately manned. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to run, yet her feet rooted to the ground. "Toan," she whispered, her voice fragile as wind through bamboo. He reached her in 2 strides, pulling the basket aside and grasping her trembling hands. The papayas rolled onto the wet pavement. "Forgotten. Why did you leave me again?" His voice cracked, raw with pain and longing. She shook her head, words tangled with tears. I cannot belong to your world. I have nothing, Toan. I am only trouble, only shame. Before she could finish, he silenced her with the fierce grip of his hand. No. You are my world. Nothing else matters. His tone carried no hesitation, only truth forged through fire and loss. Under the pale glow of lanterns, as curious onlookers paused around them, Toan pulled Tu Diem into his arms. She wept against his chest, her resistance melting into the warmth of the man who refused to let her vanish again. And for the first time, Tu Diem allowed herself to believe, perhaps she was not running anymore. Perhaps she had finally been found. That night, Toan did not let go of Tu Diem's hand. He led her gently through the market, shielding her from the curious stares of strangers, and brought her to his car. She resisted at first, her eyes swollen from tears, but his calm determination gave her no room to escape. Back at his house, the familiar scent of home greeted them. The lights were warm, the air quiet, but tension rose the moment Toan's mother appeared at the top of the staircase. Her sharp eyes caught sight of Tu Diem, her clothes damp from the rain, her face pale but glowing with vulnerability. For a long moment, silence ruled the space between them. Toan. His mother's voice was firm. You brought her back again. Yes, Toan answered without hesitation. And this time, she will stay. The words fell like a stone in the stillness of the hall. His mother descended slowly, her gaze locked on Tu Diem. Do you know what people will say? Do you know how much shame you invite into this family by holding on to her? Tu Diem lowered her head, her body trembling. Her instinct was to retreat, to apologize, to disappear. But before she could speak, Toan stepped forward, his shoulders straight, his voice clear. Enough, mother. If there is shame, let it be mine. If there is blame, let it fall on me. But do not wound her again. She has suffered enough. For the first time, Tu Diem dared to look up. His words wrapped around her like a shield, firm and unyielding. Her heart pounded. No one had ever defended her so fiercely. Mother Toan's lips tightened, her pride unwilling to bend. Yet deep in her eyes flickered something softer: conflict. Hesitation, perhaps even recognition of the love her son could no longer hide. Tu Diem finally found her voice, trembling but brave. I do not ask for riches, for comfort, or even for acceptance. All I ask is to live honestly, and not to be sold like an object. If my presence brings pain, I will leave. Her words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Toan's grip on her hand tightened. He turned to his mother once more. She will not leave. I would rather walk away from everything else before I let her go again. The declaration cut through the silence like lightning. His mother's expression faltered, caught between anger and the realization that her son's heart was no longer hers to command. And in that moment, Tu Diem understood, the battle was not yet over, but she was no longer fighting alone.